Albert Bandura's social cognitive theory, Ruth M. Reyes, EPSY 6304, Professor Dr. Karen Lewis. The learner's internal processes, the learner's ability to code and store transitory experiences in symbolic form and to represent future consequences in thought are essential to the acquisition and modification of human behavior. There are four component processes that help a human being learn and perform, which are attention, retention, motor production, and motivational processes. Now, your attention processes, this is a faculty or power of mental concentration. It's commonly said that the attention span of an elementary school child is between 5 and 12 minutes, depending on their age and grade. The intrinsic interest in a task and the challenging nature of the task, how complex it can be, also determines how long that child can pay attention. If they're being shown something new and it's highly complex and very hard to process cognitively, they will not be attentive for so long. They'll get overloaded. In fact, the task or the new information is not novel enough and not challenging enough. That also can lower their attention span. Retention process. This is an ability to recall or recognize something learned. One important process of retention is rehearsal. Not only is mental rehearsal where a person imagines themselves enacting the behavior is it important, but also the motor rehearsal is a great memory aid. Visuals are very important, especially in the younger years, in your elementary years. Students remember what they see and identify the learned knowledge. For middle school and high school students, you can have a guest speaker come to class and speak to them about something that pertains to class, but brings new information that helps students retain that information. Students will display their retention as they develop. Your motor reproduction, a student will select and organize responses according to their knowledge and then execute them. For example, a kindergarten student learning to write the ABCs on a writing pad, a high school student writing a research paper in APA style after a teacher's lecture. Your motivational processes, the keyword here is definitely motivation. Students will process information if they are motivated to do so. Intrinsic motivation should be our goal because we want students to have a passion for learning. Their motivation has to be aligned from a very young age, where they are learning to read, up to college students where they are moved by a profession. Self-efficacy is the extent or strength of one's belief in their own ability to complete tasks and reach goals. Now we have our sources of self-efficacy, and there's actually four types of sources of self-efficacy. They are mastery experiences, vicarious experiences, social persuasion, and psychological and emotional states. Now, your effects on psychological processes, actually, there are four major processes, which are cognitive, motivational, affective, and selection processes. Master experiences. How a person interprets the results of her or his previous performance is the most influential source of self efficacy beliefs. A classroom strategy that we can use is, as often as possible, invite students to evaluate their own work. The best way to strengthen self efficacy is to have students identify those things they did well on assigned tasks. Now, your vicarious experiences of observing others perform tasks, a person forms beliefs in his own efficacy when he watches someone similar model the desired behavior. Models can also be mentors if they show a better way of doing the task. A classroom strategy that can be used is teachers frequently ask students to assess something done by their peers, like reviewing an oral presentation to the class or editing a paper or a report. At the following direction. In your self efficacy journal, why don't you write down two positive things you observe that you do on a regular basis? Now, your social persuasions, these are verbal judgments made by others. Negative appraisals weaken self efficacy beliefs more than positive appraisals strengthen them. A classroom strategy would be when you ask your students to review or edit or assess the work of their peers, Have them identify those things that were done well rather than identifying errors or weaknesses in this assignment. Now, your psychological and emotional states. A person will assess how confident she feels by interpreting his or her own emotional and physical state as they contemplate an action. A classroom strategy would be begin by asking your students to imagine themselves doing something they do well. Help them identify their psychological and emotional states during time of success. Tell them that they imagine tell them as they imagine taking on new challenges, they have the best chance of success if they can replicate the same positive psychological and emotional states. Now note, this requires considerable abstract thinking skills and may not be especially useful with pre-adolescent students. These sources of self efficacy beliefs point to the importance of a quality that makes us uniquely human. This is our ability to self reflect, which is the process by which we make sense of our experience. Knowing the lifelong impact that self efficacy beliefs have, teachers and parents can help children develop healthy self reflection skills. Consistent with the theory of observational learning, a great way to do this is by modeling healthy self reflection of one's own performance and mentoring how a child is interpreting the results of his or her performance. Teachers can routinely evaluate their own performance in front of the class, specifically identifying what they did well and how they plan to build on their success. By modeling self evaluation, teachers demonstrate a process designed to promote self efficacy. The cognitive process is the performance of some composite cognitive activity, an operation that affects mental contents, the process of thinking. The motivational process is having it's the intentions, the desires, the goals, and the needs that determine the human behavior of our students. As teachers, this is very important because we are mentors, we are role models for our students. The affective process relates to the moods, the feelings, the attitudes, maybe the anxiety that our students have on a certain class or a certain assignment, even depression. It can be something that's causing that depression from the outside, from the home, or even something within the classroom. And as a teachers, we need to be aware of this process. The selection process, we can see it as a child's view of self efficacy as it relates to different academic areas, which has a large influence of what field is chosen for a career. Children begin to form career aspirations very early in life, and many times these dreams are shaped by society expectations. Self regulation comes from internal sources, such as children's developing ability to modify behavior and their opinion of a request, and also from external factors, such as the type of self regulation being requested. The fact that children can self regulate does not necessarily mean that they will, even on easier tasks. And it is very helpful to encourage children to see the reason behind the request and to understand that the change in behavior does make sense. It's also important to know what level of self regulation we can reasonably expect at different ages through their thoughts, through their feelings, and through their actions. Your principles of instruction, the components, first of all, you're identifying appropriate models in the classroom. And we're going to talk about two instruction models. The first one is the symbolic modeling. This is where teacher is a symbolic model because he or she is responsible for the classroom and is important as a model of responsibility, of integrity, sincerity, and also concern for both the individual and also the collective welfare of all the students. At any level of education, the teacher or any faculty member should also model emotional maturity, common sense, and be consistent to follow through on any type of commitment that's made. Your other model is your reciprocal teaching, which refers to an instructional activity in which students become the teacher in small groups, especially reading sessions. First of all, the teacher will model, then help students learn to guide group discussions. In establishing the functional value of behaviors, Albert Bandura recommended that instruction should attempt to establish an expectancy for positive outcomes, which increases any task attention. In teaching learning strategies, students must learn when to use them and why they are used. Establishing social behaviors is also very important in the classroom. As teachers, we can reinforce these behaviors by having students work quietly or going to recess in an orderly manner or asking permission to leave the classroom. In establishing the functional value of behaviors, the recommended instructional activities vary somewhat depending on the type of skills to be learned. There's different emphasis required for cognitive and motor skills. However, for both types of skills, instruction should provide opportunities. First of all, to code the observed behavioral into visual images or word symbols, and also to mentally rehearse the model behaviors.